Hey, Jesse.
Hey, Julia.
So you said you had a problem with the very question of whether or not we're in a simulation, right? Like, it wasn't that you had a problem with how Boston reasoned about the likelihood of us being in a simulation, although you did. But this was a separate problem with, like, the coherence of the very question.
Yeah, so I'm not sure we've really explored what we're asking by saying that we are either in a simulation or not. Um, I think most of my problem comes down to the assessment of probabilities. But
Right.
to simply say that we are in a simulation, what is it that we are asking? What experiences is it that we are talking about when we refer to being in a simulation? Because it seems like the words in a simulation have a specific context, and whether or not we are in a simulation, all of our experiences would be exactly the same as what we're experiencing right now. And so the question whether or not we are in a simulation does not make any statements, make any predictions about our potential experiences. And so it seems like a very meaningless question in that it's not connected to any kind of sensory input. The only thing I can think of that would save the term in meaning is predicting a possible escape from the matrix at some point where somebody comes in with a red and blue pill and we suddenly have very different experiences than the ones we've had so far. But that seems a pretty big stretch, and I don't think that seems to be what Bostrom was talking about.
Yeah, that wouldn't happen in this kind of matrix because, I mean, in the real matrix, people had actual bodies outside the matrix, right? They were just sort of being tricked. So it was they could easily sort of emerge from the matrix. Whereas in this simulation argument, if we're simulated, we have no existence outside of the simulation. We're just, algorithms, electrical impulses in a computer. There's no way for us to exit the simulation and pop into the real world.
Right.
But, okay, so I want to unpack this idea that if it makes no difference, if two hypotheses are equivalent in terms of what we can observe and perceive, then the difference between them is a meaningless difference.
Right.
Which sounds like what you were saying. So I don't know if... Okay, well, first of all, there is a difference in prediction that we could make.
Right.
So maybe it's not a difference in what we see and perceive around us now, but in
on that. What difference in prediction could there be? So give an example of a difference in prediction if we were in a simulation versus not in a simulation.
If we're in a simulation, then your prediction of when the universe is going to end should be much less certain than your prediction of when the universe is going to end in a non-simulated universe. Because we look around us, we observe the laws of physics and the current state of the universe and the rate at which it's expanding, et cetera, and we can sort of extrapolate to come up with an estimated lifespan of the universe, which I don't have at hand. But so in the simulated universe, at some point, the future Earthlings are just going to pull the plug on the simulation, right? We don't know when that's going to be, but we can't assume that the laws of physics and the empirical observations of the universe around us are the only thing that we would need that would result in the universe ending.
I don't know that that's a difference of prediction. It sounds like what we're doing in predicting the end of the universe in science is saying, if these laws hold true, what do we expect to see happen? And
but we assume the laws are going to hold true. That's the difference.
But any scientific statement is saying, assuming induction, assuming the laws of physics are true, and if we are in a simulation, all we are saying there is that induction might not be true. The laws that we see so far might not hold up. And so that's exactly the same in a non-simulation and in a simulation, because all we can possibly do is assume induction and work from there. And that's true in a simulation versus not in a simulation.
Huh. Interesting. So I would have said that we have the problem of induction no matter where we are. Like, no matter at what nested level of reality we're at, you always have, the same problem of induction. But then I would have said that we have an added amount of uncertainty about our future if we're in a simulated universe. Or we should if we think we're in a simulated universe. Like, that you can't just sort of lump that in with the problem of induction and say it's the same amount of uncertainty we had before. You have the problem of induction plus this additional uncertainty, I think.
I guess I have a problem assigning uncertainty to induction. It's all
whatever value you want to give it, though. This seems like extra.
Call it
X.
I guess I don't think you can assign a level of confidence to induction. Any statement we make about empirical facts and empirical predictions are predicated on assuming induction holds and saying, if my understanding of these laws continues to be correct. And so there is no way to say, assuming a 50% chance that my induction holds true, I don't think that's a sensible combination of terms, probability and induction. I just don't think that those two concepts fit together in a logically coherent way.
Okay, you might be right about that. But
I've been reading a lot of logical positivism recently.
I know it shows. It's like coming out of your pores. Well,
I'm sorry. I'll pay.
So, all right, what if I told you, what if it were the case that computer scientists could prove that any simulation, I don't know why this would be the case, but let's say they could prove that any simulation would, through some logical properties of simulation technology, would always at any point have like a 1 in a trillion chance of ending at that moment.
At any given moment?
At any given moment in the simulation.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe let's say the chance of ending is some increasing function of the time that the simulation has been running. Something like that. So then we're starting to have more of a quantifiable amount of uncertainty about the lifespan of the universe around us. And it seems like now that it's more quantified, maybe you'd be less inclined to just lump it in with induction. I mean, to lump it in with the uncertainty generated by the problem of induction.
I think how I would reply to that is the idea that what we can possibly know is that the computer simulations we are looking at, the things we call computer simulations, necessarily have this chance of ending, 1 in a trillion chance of ending. But we need the empirical observations to know whether the simulation we're living in qualify as that type of computer simulation. So until we have the empirical observations to know that what the computer scientists observe is the case, we can't justify it. And since there are no empirical experiences that we could possibly have to tell us whether or not we are in that simulation in which there's a 1 in a trillion chance of ending, we can't even start to consider it in our thinking.
Okay, let's briefly go back to one of the other assumptions you were making. Okay, in the simulated universe versus the real universe, there is a difference in the origin of each of the two respective universes, right? I mean, one originated when some creatures decided to create it. The other one originated with the Big Bang. That's all we know. Right. I mean, so even if that difference doesn't make any detectable difference in the actual nature of the current state of the universe, I don't see how it's meaningless to say that they began in different ways.
Well, it would be talking about a potential experience, and that's one sort of outside of where we are right now, outside of the matrix, outside of our reality, looking at some other cause of our matrix, our universe. And is that something we can sensibly talk about? It seems like we're saying, if it's similar, if we can possibly extrapolate from our experiences to the next level up. And that seems questionable, whether we can even talk about it and think about it, except in terms of within our own realm of experience.
I see. So it sounds like you're saying that it's meaningless to talk about anything outside of our reality, I guess.
Yeah,
and I'm using the word reality not to indicate everything that exists for every conscious being, but everything that we it's really hard to...
So here, I see it that we can think of concepts and use words that connect to experiences that we have had. To somebody who has never seen a horse or anything like a horse, to try to talk about a unicorn as a combination of a horse with a horn doesn't make any sense. But to try to talk about something that is completely alien and cut off from anything that we have experienced or could possibly experience, how can we use words? How can we form thoughts about these things if they're not a composite of different experiences we have had?
I can form thoughts about future Earthlings simulating us. It doesn't seem
in terms
incoherent.
Of concepts you have experienced.
Sure, but why? I mean, they are a similar thing. In the way I'm imagining it, they are very similar to us. They're just, more advanced and they have computer technology, but it's not like just so completely foreign to my brain space that I can't even describe it. I mean, I don't know if it's true, but I can at least describe it in a way that I think is not meaningless.
I guess to talk about outside of this reality, to talk about something that we cannot possibly interact with. So it's not discussing a similar world that we can interact with if we were there. Discussing a creator of the Matrix, I guess we could only talk about a creator of the Matrix that is like our world. So when people try to think about God creating the universe, they always anthropomorphize it to the point that they can somewhat understand it, try and think of it in terms that we can conceive of. But it seems like there are almost an infinite number of possibilities that we can never gain any confidence in. And so what makes it a meaningful claim to talk about the origin of this reality?